last year, the winner of the Tour de France was Egan Bernal. We know that. But the last French winner of the Tour de France was Bernard Hinault in 1985. But in 2019, the Tour saw a resurgence of the French, and they had expectations from Romain Bardet to Thibaut Pinot. But eventually, the true hope and the drama came from Julian Alaphilippe. While Bardet had a disappointing 15th, Pinot bowed out on stage 19, and Julian Alaphilippe ended up in 5th place. He was the yellow jersey holder up through that wacky stage 19 with the hailstorm and the rain, and it ended up with the top 5. Every year, the ASO, they designed a tour route that best helped their countrymen, that's my opinion at least, and a route to deny the true upper crust of the cycling world, such as let's make it Lance-proof, let's make it Sky-proof, let's make it Ineos-proof. This year, however, Chris Froome and Geraint Thomas, they did the work the ASO couldn't do, and they've eliminated themselves due to their fitness for their tour team. Also, ASO has given us a true tour devoid of any significant time trials. They've set up what could be drama on stage 20, at least the real last test for Thibaut Pinot in his hometown. Welcome, everybody, to the 2020 Tour de France preview show, route only. And on today's show, we're welcoming a Francophile, a former expat, recently recertified as American citizen, Jonathan Scriven. Jonathan, welcome. And please take umbrage to anything I just said there about the Tour de France as it is. And welcome.
You actually stole my open. That's it. No, it's exactly right. That's when I first look at the route here, one of the first things I said to myself was, boy, they're trying to set this up for a French win, no doubt.
Which is, we do see that often. And while this is going here, you and I'm going to just play on the side here the Tour de France, their flyover, and you can take a look at this, but we'll go through while this is playing. I'm just going to describe a little bit about the tour this year. And then you and we're going to go through stage by stage. We're going to talk about it. You're going to give the correct pronunciations for each of these towns, give a little knowledge of them and the roads that you know so well out there. And then, and we'll also talk a little bit about just kind of what is happening with the tour and COVID in general. Okay, so let's just do a little, as we said, Egan Bernal, he's the Team Ineos, he's the first Colombian to win, he's the defending champ. We started the prologue in Nice this year. We're probably going to look at your old town as it's the video is going here. This is quite the animation.
Bringing back memories. This is exactly where I've been living for the last 13 years. So I'm super excited about the Grand Départ.
Right. So as we're looking out here, we're going to see climbing is going to start right away in stage 2, I believe. And we'll go into depth on that. So you have that as a difference. To me, it brings back a reminiscence of the 2013 Vuelta where they had climbing right away. It eliminates a lot of the chaff and might actually help the tour in a sense where you get some of the guys that think they're going to be potential winners, but they're not. So we're going to have that. The tour then goes over into the Pyrenees. They don't have a mountaintop finish in the Pyrenees. There's no time trials except for stage 20. They come back to the Alps and they go up a little bit. That Massif Central area, I think you can talk about that. Yep. It's always kind of a rolling, and they say heavy roads there. We'll ask about why that is the case. And then, like I said, finishing up at the Planche de Belfi, I think they're having gravel. I don't know if it's on that stage or but a time trial in Thibaut Pinot's hometown. I think he also owns goats, so he's a true mountain goat in that sense. So have you looked at this flyover at all, and how does this feel?
I've seen it only very quickly, but it's very so let me give you the quick background. One of the reasons why I'm super excited personally about this tour is because a lot of it is in areas where I've been living, riding, and I say that as a total amateur, but also because of the sports activities of my youngest kid who played ice hockey, we traveled a lot in that sort of eastern area. So I've traveled a lot up through those Alps areas and the high countries, sort of near Geneva. And so there's a lot of stages where even if I haven't ridden them on my bike, I've driven over them many times. I've stayed in the villages where they're staying just because of other activities. So I'm super excited about it. And there's a couple other things too. I mean, you alluded to a couple things about the tour. I think as I looked at it, I noticed, of course, the lack of the TT except for the last one, which ends with this, Planche de Belfi. But it's kind of exciting for me as someone who has lived in France. The Alps and the Pyrenees always get the highlights, but this year the Massif Central and the Jura get a lot of play. In fact, I was trying to calculate where, if the tour had been held at the original time, I was trying to calculate what stage would have been on the 14th of July, which is Bastille Day. Yeah. That's always like this big, epic stage. And if I'm calculating correctly, that's a stage that would have been in either the Massif Central or the Jura this year. And that's unusual. It's very typical to be that big sort of Alp stage or that big Pyrenees stage. So that's kind of interesting just for me as someone who understands that the people in those areas often feel like, hey, we've got mountains too, we've got skiing too, we've got cycling too. So that's a really cool thing. And even the Vosges Mountains, with the Planche de Belfi, they play this huge role. So that's kind of exciting and intriguing to me.
It's the Jura, right? Or however you pronounce that.
The Jura, yeah.
That's a mountain range that's around the Massif Central. Is that correct? And it's pretty nasty.
I'll give you the quick geography. So everyone knows the Alps, okay, are sort of like, if you can picture Geneva, it kind of jets into the eastern part of France. The Alps are kind of to the south and east of that, and the Jura is just on the other side of that. So they're very close. In fact, from the Jura, you can see Mont Blanc very easily. And the Massif Central is the one that most people don't really even recognize as being this fairly impressive mountain stage. And I'll talk about why those are unique in just a second, because I've spent a little time there too, doing some summer activities and things. Okay. And I'll start. Well, maybe we can start, but I'll let you go ahead. But there's a couple of things I'll say about the Nice stage too.
Let's take a look at here's the map. I guess you can see it. So maybe does that help explain kind of what we're looking at? So let's do a discussion here. We can start with what's going on in Nice. I mean, you lived there for a long time. Sure. Finish that off. If there was anything else, because I do want to say a few things here. Sure. Like I said, one time trial. It's mostly a climbing time trial, so we've got that interesting point. Right. It's got 2 rest days. We're looking at the normal stuff here. 21 stages, 3,470 kilometers, 7 mountain stages, 29 categorized climbs, some maybe 4 pure sprinting days that I can see. They said there's some gravel in there. I haven't seen which stage is actually doing that. The interesting part too is also the Pyrenees. There's no mountaintop finish there. And then, like we said, the Thibaut Pinot. Hey, we're finishing your hometown. Start with, let's go and just start right away with what's going on there in Nice. And first of all, your involvement with that town in general. And then why are you not going to be there for the tour?
Okay. So a couple things. So let me start with sort of the Tour de France side. And this is the sort of poetic side of things. I love the Grand Départ in Nice for a couple of reasons. I know it's been in the process for a long time, but if you think about the 2 most famous boulevards in France, it's obviously the Champs-Élysées in Paris, right, and the Promenade des Anglais in Nice. And so I'm really intrigued by the fact that this year the race starts on the Promenade des Anglais, which is this unbelievably beautiful road right along the coast. It's actually built by English people. The history of it is, sorry, I'm a history teacher, so I like the history of it. It was built by English sort of aristocrat class people who used to come down to Nice all the time for holidays. And back in about 1820 or so, there was this really horrible harvest. And a lot of the French came to Nice looking for work, and the English thought they were beggars and poor. So they said, well, what if we built this walkway along the water that would separate us from all the other people? And now, of course, it's this iconic area. It was very popular after World War I and World War II. And that's where the stage is going to start on the first day and finish on the first day. It's where it's going to start on the second day and finish on the second day. But in addition to that, it's going to do circuits both days. Now, maybe I'm getting too much into the poetry here, but when you consider that this is also the place where the attacks in Nice took place 4 years ago, 4 trips. I don't know. Maybe it's me reading too much into it, but in a way,
are the French into numerology? Is that a thing?
A little bit, but what the French are into is sticking their middle finger up at things. Okay. And this is a way to sort of stick a middle finger up at terrorists and in general and say, you know what, we're going to do this anyway. And so I don't know if there's that symbolism. I'm not reading that. This is just my own sense as someone who's sort of from that area, but I love that. So
the symbolism goes deeper because remember that was the year Froome ran up Ventoux. Yeah. His bike was cracked. He was cracked. He is still cracked. I'm trying something here.
Thank you. And it was probably my shirt that made you think of that, right? This is my Mont Ventoux.
No, I just always remembered that happened, and that there was it was right around the same time that Ventoux was happening was when the attacks were, and were they going to actually make it to Nice, and was, going through there, and was that going to be an issue? So anyway, that's part of it.
And, for those of you, so I actually went to the team time trial. I think it was in 2013, which was in Nice. And if anyone watched that, you'll notice that even the Promenade des Anglais looks a lot different because of that terrorist attack. There's much more non-car areas. There are now huge, and they're actually beautiful, palm trees that sort of serve as barriers. Because if you remember, the car went from the road, jumped onto the walk area, and that's where he hit a bunch of people. So now it's not really possible to do that because of a variety of things put in place, like palm trees. So it will even look a little bit different this year than it did in 2013, which I think is the last time it was in Nice.
Look, talking to you, there's always so many little sidebars that we could take. But one of the interesting points you made me think of there is the security that they always worry about for the tour, right? And I don't know, with COVID, I almost think that that's going to be really minimized, right? Because it's with less people, it's going to be more obvious something happens, and it's probably easier to control because I assume the crowds are going to be the norm. Anyway, so why don't you pronounce the names for us for the stages 1 and 2?
Let's see what it says here. Stage Nice. 1 and 2 are easy. It's just Nice, right?
Right.
Okay, so let me just say something about the first 2 stages. If you watch, they're right around Nice. Obviously, this is training ground for a lot of pro cyclists. They know these roads like the back of their hands. Guys who are based in Nice, over the last few years, people like Ian Boswell and Larry Warbass and Joe Dabrowski, they're based in Nice. TJ Van Garderen, they ride these roads all the time. And that first stage, even though it's not a mountain stage, don't underestimate. There's some hills. I mean, the mountains come right down to the sea. And I was explaining this to somebody else the other day. This is not the tour where you start with 5 days in Brittany. This is not that tour at all. I mean, there are significant climbs on the first day, although I still think it'll be a sprint finish. So I believe it's 2 50-kilometer loops and then another 70-kilometer loop. The second day, though, is serious mountains already, as we go into what's called the Haut Pays, the high country behind Nice. And it's this natural park area called the Mercantour. It's very beautiful, very wooded, pretty good roads. But my favorite part of this is the Col de Turini, which is almost never in the tour.
Cat 1 climb, they have it here.
Yeah, Cat 1 climb. It's hardly ever in the tour. In fact, I don't think it's been in the tour for at least 30 years or so. But it was in the Pyrenees last year. And, if you have in your head the idea of Alpe d'Huez being these switchbacks, this is that. Okay, it's not as high, but it is a stunning, stunning view. I've actually done that one myself. It took me a long time, but it is absolutely gorgeous. The hairpins are iconic. If you just go to Google Earth and look at it, you'll see, or just Google what it looks like. It's pretty spectacular. And then from there, you plunge down into Nice for about 50 kilometers. Speeds will be crazy. And then you get to finish off the second stage. I think it's the second stage. I have my notes here to make sure. To finish off the second stage, you get the very familiar Col d'Ez, which is familiar because every other year or so, it's the finishing stage for Pyrenees. So again, these roads are super, super familiar for these riders.
And I think we have a photo of.
There you go. Well done. So that is, I believe that's TJ Van Garderen. Now, this is a while ago now. This was at Pyrenees, and that's me and my kids there. And that is the very beginning. That must be, I'd say, 200 meters into the 9.4, I want to say, kilometer Col d'Ez climb. And it's a serious climb. It'll separate some people. But I think stage 1 will end in a sprint, but I don't think stage 2 will.
Okay. Yeah. Stage 2, we'll go back to here. So, I mean, as you mentioned, there's 2 Cat 1s on there, and a Cat 2, and then you've got the finish. And that is a long descent coming down into there.
It's a long descent. I mean, it is I think it's about 50 kilometers, and it's serious descent. A lot of it is technical as well.
Right. So that I just mentioned the Vuelta, and because to me, that was kind of the last big Grand Tour state. Well, you always get them kind of in the Giro as well, but that one was significant. The 13 one, partly because Chris Horner American won it, but they had such intense climbing on stage 4 that it blew all these guys out.
Right.
And you had separation already 40 seconds to a bunch of guys. The top 10 were all split apart. And I think, and I remember Horner saying, because he's a pretty wise tactician, saying, hey, this was really good because it took some riders out. Now they're not fighting for the front when they still think they have a chance. You always have that, right? Top 15 stages, guys are fighting like crazy to be on the front with their team, and they may not, and then as soon as the hard day comes, they're gone. And then, okay, they don't worry about it. And it just alleviates a lot of stress for these teams being up front all the time. But you're going to have, sprinters that may not have a chance for this. I mean, look at the stage one, there's enough there. That could be, a Sagan and Wout type of thing rather than, the big, just pure sprinter guys. So, okay. So 2 days in Nice, day 3 starts in Nice. So these guys at least will, as far as transports go, it's going to be an easier thing. And, maybe it'll be better situation for their COVID bubble that they have going on. Did you hear about the new protocol that they're having, with the tour and testing positive?
No, I didn't.
So they just came out with this, I think it was Friday, and on the show that we had, we talked about it. So at the 21st, and if a team, they're going to have the teams in bubbles. So they have, the NBA and stuff, they're kind of doing this as well. But the team is all isolated from everybody else. But if 2 people become positive of COVID during the tour, and that's staff or riders, they're going to eject the whole team.
Good grief.
So, and teams are objecting to this. And then there was an article on CyclingNews today. There's been maybe 4 or 5 pro cyclists since, cycling's come back that have tested positive, retested, and been tested negative.
I read that today, the false positives, and that's a problem.
Right. So, and then as my buddy Chris that does a show with us, he's like, hey, if Pinot gets close to the lead, who's doing this testing? Maybe just have a false positive. Those guys are gone.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was, you can't come back, so.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll be easier for them all being in one spot.
Yeah, I hope so. And so, it's like I said, it's essentially 3 full days there. And that takes us
about
to
stage 3.
Yeah. So stage 3 is actually, I don't want to say my favorite, but personally, because this is the one that is sort of brings together a lot of things that are interesting for me. And I think cyclists will like it too. So first of all, it goes through sort of where I used to live. Exactly. I live just west of Nice. This goes just west of Nice, goes right by my house, up through the mountains above a place called Grasse. Grasse is the sort of perfume capital, but more importantly, it's a perfume capital of France. I think Chanel No. 5 was created there, or something like that. But more than that, historically, this is a very important route. This is the cyclists will be following for most of the day something called the Rune of Polio, which is the route that Napoleon took when he came back from Elba, 1815, and he wanted to sort of reestablish himself. And he feared that all the traditional routes sort of along the rivers would be blocked. So he took like the most mountainous, treacherous route up through the mountains, and it succeeded. But right now, this drive called the Rune of Polio is one of the most beautiful drives you can imagine. Lots of switchbacks, not huge climbs by pro standards. Okay, when I go out and ride these rides, that's like my big climbing day, because for me they're enormous. But there's some serious hills, and then it sort of levels out. And it ends in a town that I've spent a night in many times called Sisteron. I think it's been in the tour before, but it's a beautiful, beautiful citadel, right along the river just before you get to the Alps. And that stage, even though on a map, it kind of looks like it's rolling, for pros, it's not going to be a hard deal. I'm assuming this will be a sprint finish, but sort of historically, in terms of beauty and in terms of me personally, I'm super looking forward to watching this stage.
Yeah, so there's a bit of climbing on the way out, and you look at the profiles, and sometimes you roll your eyes like, geesh, I don't know how they do these, but it's not the worst. And there's a decent amount. I mean, once again, it could be a roller type that Sagan
Absolutely.
type of thing that gets away, and so you can spit out some of these.
So as I'm looking at your screen,
and what's kind of that terrain?
Is it the bottom or the top one?
It's the top one, stage 3.
Okay, yeah. So the thing is, you start at sea level, and then you very quickly get up to some pretty big climbs.
It's like almost 1,200 meters.
You get up to like Saint-Vallier and the Col de Pion, which I used to ride a lot on my days. That's within the first third. I think those are the first climbs.
Right.
When you're starting at sea level, those are pretty serious.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's a Cat 3. And look, none of these are over 200 kilometers. So sometimes when you get to shorter stages and a little pitchy stuff, it gets pretty exciting. Okay. So Sisteron, and then stage 4.
Okay, stage 4, again, they stay in Sisteron and they go up to, we start to get into the first of the sort of ski villages. So this first ski village, which I've been to a few times because as I said, my son plays hockey, it's called Orcier, and it is beautiful. And I just want to say the roads are tiny. They're just tiny roads. Now, it won't matter because I believe if I'm looking at your chart, I think they finished there. So there's not a huge descent. And in fact, I believe they go even higher if I'm looking at my own notes here to a place called Orcier-Merlet, which is just basically at the top of that ski station. I don't think this is
the finishes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there it is. I don't think this is a stage that's going to sort of separate people. This is where I see, probably somebody who may not win the tour, maybe jumping out and trying to get a stage win, a climb or something like that. It's fairly standard. This is at the foot of the Alps. So if you're looking at a map of France, and as you go north from sort of Nice and Marseille, you get into the Alps about the time you get to Gap, which is, I know, where we're going next. And these hills are right at the beginning of that, but it's still rolling, that's for sure.
So we're going actually from Nice on the coast there, going a little west and then straight up, kind of, and like you said, back into kind of the Alps.
Right at the foothills. Yeah, I mean, you look at a town like Gap, and it's a ski town. It's near places like Briançon, which was in the tour, I think 2 or 3 years ago. It's very often there. So this is not the deep Alps, but it's right at the foothills, and there's some good climbing there for sure.
Okay, so stage 5.
Let's see, Gap. So this is one where I don't have a lot of personal knowledge. This is basically a sort of a getting out of the mountains kind of stage.
Right. What do you know about Gap? And because
I know Gap.
My take on Gap from the tour is it always feels like a transition stage. So it must be kind of that flat area, and they're either coming to it or leaving it, kind of in that transition area.
Yeah, I'll talk about that because I know more about the city than this particular stage.
Perfect.
So Gap is literally a gap in a couple of big mountains, and so it is relatively flat when you get to the town itself, but it is like a bowl surrounded by mountains. So to get out and to get in, you've either got to find the 1 or 2 gaps that go through the mountains, or you're going up and over. So it very much is often a transition either into the Alps or out of the Alps. And in this case, it's kind of neither, because we're not really in the Alps yet. Right. So it's a sort of odd place for Gap to be. If I look at past tours, I think Gap is usually a little later in the tour when they're more in the deep Alps. But in this case, it serves as a perfect transition point.
Yeah. Well, it would have to be, right? Because they would usually come through the Alps, hit it, or all the way through the Pyrenees. So you're looking at, like stage 10 or, 14 or something, I guess, or 7. I don't know. So I guess. So what about the finish there, Privas?
I don't know. I don't know anything about Privas, I'm afraid. I mean, I know that it should be something where the sprinters can have their time, but I've not been to Privas personally. Don't have much to say about Privas in terms of my own personal knowledge.
Right, and you're right. It should be a sprinter day there. It looks like it's all downhill mostly.
Yeah, it's pretty much
Stage 6.
6 is one of those typical for this year kind of stages where flat, and then boom, a big hill at the top. Sort of this traverse from the eastern part of France to the western part of France. When I saw this particular stage, the first thing that came into my mind, based on the little amount of time I've been to that particular region, is how hot it is. And that is what makes this tour different. And that's something I was going to talk about.
I was going to ask you. Go ahead.
Yeah, you're not going to see what is often huge heat issues in these sort of south central parts of France because we're in September.
Right.
In fact, by the time we get to the Alps in sort of mid to late September, we might be dealing with very cold temperatures or perhaps even snow. So that's another thing that's quite different about this tour. This is a perfect stage for one of those hot heaters where it's like, 95 degrees, and it's just not going to be that way this time. So it should be a stage where teams can decide if they want to put someone up, maybe an escape. I don't know.
Total side note, but on the weather, because that was one of my first questions. How this is going to play out on all these areas. Maybe the importance of the tour, which we obviously know, they get first billing, and one of the biggest races that may be impacted is the Giro. I mean, Giro kind of comes into the race season every year, struggling against snow and everything. Maybe they're going to struggle with it going out. So
listen, I can tell you that from the school where I used to teach, we used to have a view of the sort of the low Alps, okay, not the deep Alps, but this is the stuff behind Nice, right? There's snow there by mid-September very often. So, if you're getting into the high Alps by mid-September, it's very likely on some of those big cols that you're going to have weather that could be problematic. Most of the time it's not in September, but there could be.
So you say stage 6, you don't necessarily think it's, or maybe you didn't say that. It looks like it's got a kick at the end.
End.
I could see it being a breakaway type of
exactly
thing.
Right.
Yeah, not, who knows? It's once again, it's under 200K. Stage 7.
Again, it's that same sort of transition. What's unique about this stage is it goes from Millau, which is a famous viaduct. I don't know if you've seen the Millau Bridge, but if your listeners or watchers Google that, it is a absolutely spectacular feat of engineering. And so again, this is sort of a kind of a rolling stage that ends going, quickly into a town called Lavaux. And it's, I don't know these areas. I've been to Millau before, only to cross over that bridge. And I don't know actually if the tour is crossing the bridge or if they're just using it as a backdrop, because winds on that bridge can be, devastating, like blow you over devastating. So I'm not sure if they're actually using it or if they're using it just as a backdrop. We'll have to see. I don't know.
I think I've seen that because, the tour, one thing they love to do is to show the landscape and everything. And then, the announcers they have all the info and they've talked about that. So we'll keep an eye out for that. These are the kind of things that we're looking for from you, by the way. So well done. Stage 8.
Pyrenees. I guess if I have this right. Yes, this is from Cazares to Loudonville. So obviously the two big climb, the big climb that everyone probably knows is the Porte de Balais. Right. And this is one, I think I have this right. I was going to ask you, I didn't get a chance to look it up. I think this is where Contador attacked Andy Schleck when Schleck broke his chain. When was that? 11, 12?
Yeah.
Something
Chain
like that.
gate. You're right.
Chain gate. Anyway, so people will be familiar with that. The next col also, which is the Péressourde, is one of these typical sort of high climbing Pyrenees cols. And I first day in the Pyrenees, is this a point where somebody makes a real move, one of the leaders? It's the first sort of real big mountain stage after the first couple stages in Nice. So this could be one of those moving day kinds of stages.
You're right. That's exact. The Porte de Balais, whatever you say.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was 2010. Good call on close to being in there.
Okay.
Yeah. The Péressourde is always a difficult climb. So what you're seeing here though is I think they've done this too over the Péressourde down into Loudonville. Or please, you're the expert on that. Okay, sure, that too. And it's always interesting when you have these over the top descents and then to a flat finish there because you're getting. So it's a chance for Bardet's off the front. He may get closed down as an example. He's not going to solo out from like 2 or 3 riders that can catch him. So it's those are fun. Good call on the chain gate stuff there as well. Stage 9.
I had this thing in my head. I was like, I think that was the ballet. Okay.
Right.
Let's see. Where are we here? Po. So this is again sort of one of these. Po. We all know Po. I think that's been a rest stage more than any other stage and all. So this region. So I've spent a little bit of time in the Pyrenees on the sort of eastern side, and this is, I think, going more to the western side. So I haven't driven or ridden on these roads at all myself, but you have the sort of big climbs right in the middle, and that's an interesting way to do it because it leaves a lot of time for either catching up or for groups to sort of catch a breakaway rider or whatever that may be. But as you said earlier, the Pyrenees, I would say this year are a little bit underwhelming.
Right.
And like I said, that might be by design to give some some highlights to sort of these other mountain ranges, but it's just interesting that there's not that, at least from my perspective, that just like iconic day in the Pyrenees, but that's just the way it is. Right.
I mean, because if you look at iconic Pyrenean climbs, How to Calm and some of these others, you've got, we just said the Péressourde and then the Col de Mare Blanc. I mean, those are only real 2 big names that come out from those 2 climbs. Anyway, what do you know about how to say it. What is the finishing?
Which one?
Stage 9. How do you pronounce that?
Stage 9 from Pau to Laurent. Yes.
Okay. Anything significant about either one of those towns, cities?
No.
They'll love to hear that you say that.
I wish I had been to every single one of these towns. And by the way, my disclaimer, as I said to you before, is even the French don't know how to pronounce a lot of French towns. So, I mean, they make things up sometimes.
Gotcha.
But I do know that it's Pau to Laurent.
Okay. So that's stage 9. Then we have a rest day out there. Right. And then we go to stage 10, which looks like unintelligible. You can't pronounce that. What is it?
Yes, it's
what are they doing with these words?
Yeah, the Ile de Oloron. So the next 3 stages are all stages where I haven't spent a lot of time. Okay. But this is to give you sort of the lay of the land. This is that typical Western. It's in the Bordeaux region. It's very, very flat. Okay.
Yeah. Well, look at the stage profile.
Okay.
There.
I see it now. Again, there's 2 things that stick out to me if this is in July. One is heat, okay, which I don't think we're going to get, and the second is wind. And so you have sort of 3 stages in a row where those are the main features. I think you go into a place called Poitiers, and there are some rolling hills in Poitiers. I've been to Poitiers, but you're talking about essentially 3 days where I don't know if it's sort of like catch your breath, or if it's breakaways or what have you, but they should be relatively uneventful. You can see up there in the west where we are now in the.
Yeah, that's quite the transfer that they took.
It's quite the transfer. You fly right over Bordeaux and get into the west area. And Poitiers is sort of the heart of that area. When you get a little bit towards the Ile de Oloron, that's near a place called. I've been there. I forget what it's called. That's called.
It's like on some island or peninsula, right? That they go out.
Yes, La Rochelle. It's near La Rochelle, and so I think it comes across. You recall in some of these stages in the tour where there are bits of the road that are only good during low tides.
Right.
If you remember those, so I'm not sure if this is one of those, but this might be one of those areas where they literally have to go at a certain time, otherwise the water would come up over it.
Well, I'm trying to remember the name, but that was the seminal issue with Lance and Jonathan Botters talked about it. But that was more up north, and that was not this one, at least.
Yes, that happens a lot near Mont Saint Michel as well, in the Normandy and Brittany areas as well. But this might be one of those areas. I'm not 100% sure on that though.
Okay, so we did stage 10 and we did stage 11, basically.
10, 11, and 12. I don't have a whole lot to say because I haven't spent a lot of time there, other than to say they should be sort of relatively sort of uneventful, which is what you have in the tour. There's the time for the sprinters, the time for breakaways, and things like that. Before we get into the Massif Central.
Right, and so stage 12, pronounce those 2, and then is there anything significant or insignificant about either one of those?
No, so Chauvigny is the name of where that begins, and it ends in a place called Saran.
Okay, a little climby there, but once again, this is more of the okay, stage 13.
Okay, so now we get into what is interesting to me, and that is this sort of a couple of days where the Massif Central plays an important role. So the Massif Central is this region, right as it suggests in its name, in the center of France, that basically most people don't know includes high mountain peaks. There are ski resorts there. There are, lots of things. But what's interesting is how these came about. So the region where the tour is going to go through is a region called the Puy-de-Dôme. And if you look at the name of the finishing town on stage 13, it's called the Puy-Marie. And in French, a Puy, P-U-Y, is essentially a hill that has been created, or a mountain that has been created due to an extinct volcano. So when you see the word Puy, you're talking about volcanic.
Gotcha.
So the Puy-de-Dôme is the region where we are, and that's the largest peak in this Massif Central. And you can sort of see it on the stage here. What's unique sort of about the Massif Central is lots of these little peaks that go up and down like volcanic activity. And so we see that here on the first stage. And it ends on the Puy-Marie, which is not, if you look at it carefully, not high in terms of elevation, but boy, does it pitch up at the end. I think at the end, it's well into double digits for the last couple of kilometers. And so that's interesting. And I think that could be a separator Or I could see attacks coming on this stage for sure.
Well, yeah, especially with a day that's so up and down, and I've heard Lance and other people talk about the road surface. And it might be different later on in the year, but the road surface is such that it feels slow. So
that's interesting.
So they're like, it's just a struggle, and it might just be the fact that you're just constantly up and down, bad road, and that it just feels like a slog. And so,
and heat, like the heat may not be the same factor that it normally is. Then that takes us to stage 14, which kind of gets us out of the Massif Central into Lyon. But again, going from Clermont, I've done that drive from Clermont-Ferrand to Lyon, and it's there's a lot of these little hills that you don't really notice so much unless you're on a bike, and you can see there's a couple of climbs right there in the middle. But lots of tricky little climbs in the beginning of that stage, and then it descends right into Lyon, and we're all familiar with Lyon. It's a beautiful, beautiful city.
Right. So now we're getting much closer to the east side.
Yes.
And back once again, getting close to those mountains.
Yeah. So if we look at stage 15, this is from Lyon to the Grand Colombier. Now, the Colombier has been in this many times, but here we are now taking a look at a fairly impressive mountain stage that is in the Jura region. And what's very cool about this, as I was looking at it, is so the Grand Colombier is this climb that you can ascend from a lot of different angles. And the Tour decided we're going to do them all. So this stage is actually an ascent up the same climb 3 different ways. And that's a very cool way to do it. So the Grand Colombier will be the end. And the last 70 kilometers or so of this stage is essentially climbing the same peak 3 times. So that's kind of cool. So each one will be slightly different. Of course, you can see there, the pitch is different depending on which side you go up. But that's a sort of an interesting tactic to use. If you look at the map, it's just a jumble there because they're just going around in circles as they climb up that Colombier 3 times. A
great insight, because when you just look at the profile, you don't get that.
Correct. You can't see that on profile, but
it doesn't. It's not like the same name each time either.
No,
so.
Correct, because each time you go, it's a slightly different peak. So, and that's very typical. Even something like Mont Ventoux, I'm wearing the shirt. There's 3 different ways to climb that, and each way is very, very different. I mean, it's night and day in some ways. So that's the same with the Colombier.
8.1% for the first time up, 8.7% for the second, 11.5 kilometers, and then 6.9. And then the last one is, it's a slog of 8.3 and 9.6 for the last 3.4. So a total of 7.4 and 3.4. I mean, looking at that, that's going to be a beast the last way that you're going up there.
It's a beast.
Yeah.
And obviously a big day off afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. So then we have a rest day, then second rest day, and then we have stage 16.
Yeah. So now we get to sort of those traditional Alp stages that people know. So we start in La Tour de Pin. We finish in Villard de Lans. And this is sort of the, it's the Grenoble area. This is the area, if you have viewers who are old enough to remember the 68 Olympics, this is where many of the ski activities were held. On the last climb, I think I have here, it's the Montée de Saint-Nizier de Moucherotte. This is where, I did look that up, this is where the ski jumping was done in 68. So this is very typical French Alpine. Okay, and what that typically means is, again, quite a bit cooler, quite a bit higher, although not as high as coming up in a couple of stages, but sort of a very typical Alpine stage where you have steep ups and more than that, super steep downs. And those can be very tricky. And again, we're talking about September. So, you get a little bit of moisture and cool temperatures. Those can be treacherous.
Val d'Aran, I mean, that's your typical, I think that's been in the Tour a bunch of times. We're very, very well known for what we have there. Stage 17? 17,
as you can see from the profile, is basically the Col de Madeleine. That's the famous col. So we come out of Grenoble here. And again, we're getting into sort of area that's known for Olympics. This time it's Albertville. Okay, so we're heading. If I make sure I have this right.
92. What was that?
92. Correct. Okay. Albertville. So Grenoble and Albertville are only about 45 minutes apart. And then once you get sort of out of Grenoble, you'll get on your way to Albertville, and then you turn south. And the region here, and I have it here, as I said, it's the Col de Madeleine and it's the Merida. And for those of your listeners or watchers who are into skiing, the big ski resort here is called Courchevel, which is quite it's like one of the biggest ski resorts in Europe. And these are all the little mountains here. So I'll move on to the next stage, because the next stage is brutal.
Well, before you go,
okay, sorry.
How close is all this to Italy?
So where they are is not as close as you can get. So this whole region is right along the Italian border, but this is sort of slightly more west than the traditional other stages where you actually dip into Italy. So we're close. You can be in Italy in a car in 45 minutes, but we're not going to be near the Italian border on any of these climbs.
Okay.
If I have the map exactly correct. Yeah.
You probably do. Stage 18.
Okay, 18, Merida. So these are regions where I've spent a lot of time, and they are spectacular, as you can imagine. They are super steep, but more than anything else, and you can feel it even if you just visit. And I think the profile will bear this out. They are high. Like, I don't know what you are showing there for Merida as a height. I don't know if I wrote that down.
The height, it looks like here you're getting as the first climb, 1978.
Okay, so we're at
2,000 meters.
Yeah, this is 2,000 meters. This is a big difference from a climb that's at like 1,000 meters. So you're getting into the real high altitude. And I think this is the most traditional of the Alp stages. 3 or 4 really big climbs, super high altitude, loads of opportunities for attacks. I mean, this is the stage where you're taking your break on the downhill, and you're making sure you watch every uphill, because there's going to be attacks. So
the interesting there is they start off immediately climbing, hit a cat, which is the cat 1 is the biggest climb of the day, and then there's a 3, a 2. There's another one, but you're kind of already at a higher elevation, because they start under about 500 meters up to 2,000 in the first 45K.
Yeah,
there you go.
It goes up, and it's it's traditional roads in the so these are very well maintained roads. That's not going to be a problem. September is actually a better time than July. So the roads are good. They're not as narrow as some of the roads behind Nice, because these are Courchevel is such a big ski area that there's a lot of infrastructure. The roads, I don't think we're going to be a huge issue in terms of their size. But yeah, you can see here on the map you just put up, we're just starting to cluster around that area right near Geneva, Albertville, Grenoble.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, anything else? I mean, what do you notice about? I mean, these are the two sort of, if you look at the traditional way the Tour de France goes, this is where you're going to have some movement, I would guess.
Right. What I am noticing, though, is you're not, sometimes you see this near the end, and it's all you see is like stage 17 as an example, pitch to the finish.
Right.
You're not seeing a ton of that. I mean, you're just not seeing necessarily all the mountaintop finishes. So that's a little interesting to me. And I don't know. I'm trying all of this. I'm always thinking of as I said, I think the designers definitely try to do certain things to help people. I don't know, is Pinot helped with this or not? Possibly.
I think so. I mean, look, you said this at the beginning, the fact that there's not a real sort of traditional time trial, there's a lot of guys who they wait till the time trial. Well, that's not going to happen, because the one time trial that we have, and that's coming up, is relatively short, and it's absolutely brutal at the end. It's a massive climb at the end. Right. So, I think this has been designed specifically for a certain kind of person to win, for sure.
Right. Okay. Stage 19.
Stage 19, just traditional. Okay, Bourg-en-Bresse. It's just a very cute little town, and it's just basically running through the foothills of the Jura to get to the hometown of Thibaut Pinot. That's basically the only reason why we have this.
Yeah. So once again, some up and down stuff. Nothing
up
real
and down.
big.
It's foothills. I mean, it's you could see maybe a breakaway or something here, but in terms of the leaders, I think teams are going to be able to easily protect anyone. I think this is basically just a protection day to set up for the TT.
Right, exactly. And an opportunist day for those others.
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
Too much for the sprinters. I don't know, but that'll be interesting.
We'll see.
And then boom, we have stage 20, leaving it all to the end, as they like to do. I'm a fan actually of doing this climbing time trial here.
Yeah.
So looks like, I mean, look, to begin with, let's say you have just the people, let's assume Roglic is fine as an example, and it's really between him, maybe, Pinot still in there, and Bernal or something like this. I mean, this would, to me, favor a Roglic because he could steamroll that first section and he climbs just fine. But it doesn't mean that you can't lose everything in the climb as well. From some other one, Pinot, who might not be as strong, or Bardet, they'll still be able to kill it on the climb. So
can you tell me? I didn't write it down. So the planche is what? Is it about 7 kilometers, 6, or is it less?
Yeah, so it looks like right about the 30, there's a time check there where they start to pitch up between 27.5 and 30K, and it goes to 36K.
Okay, so
you're looking at the last, anywhere from 6 to 10.
So the Planche de Belleville is, as you know, just brutal. I think it's up above 20%. So I'll indulge me here, the historian. So the history, I looked this up a couple of years ago, actually, but the history of this town. So during the 30 Years' War, there was a group of mercenaries who'd come in and they were attacking the villages around the Vosges Mountains. So we're in the Vosges Mountains, and I love that we're talking about this in the Vosges Mountains. Most people never heard of the Vosges Mountains. We're in the Vosges Mountains. So in the 30 Years' War, the mercenaries come, and a group of the women from this local town, it's called something else, they flee up the mountains because they're afraid of being raped and killed and whatever. Pillaged, all the traditional things. And I think
I've seen Three Amigos. I know.
Yeah, and I think, of course, they were Vikings, because that's what Vikings do. The Vikings were going to rape and pillage. So they race up the mountain. The mercenaries find out they're there. They chase after them. And then, according to the legend, rather than surrender or succumb to these mercenaries, they plunge themselves off a cliff and into a lake and kill themselves. According to the story, there's a young Frenchman there who sees this happen. He's a member of the army. And he takes this big piece of wood that he finds and he carves in it belle fille, beautiful women. And that is the story of Planche de Belleville. So you can thank me for that forever and ever.
I would say I like it, and it's kind of a sad story if you really think about it.
It's an incredibly sad story. And here we're celebrating it in the penultimate stage of the tour.
Right. And maybe, I don't know, is that an omen of what, so I bet some people are going to end up plunging themselves off of the cliff there as well. I don't, so last year when the stage 6, when they had this up to the top there, I know they had it a few years before in the tour as well, but they had not gone as far as they did last year. Last year, they went over some gravel and did another hard pitch to the top. I'm not sure if this goes all the way to the top. If it does, then that's the gravel.
Right. I read that they weren't going to the top, but then I read somewhere else that it was going to stop. So I don't know. My guess is if it's a time trial, they'll probably stop it, won't they? Would they go? I don't know.
It's a climbing time trial, so they're not necessarily. You're not going to be having. If anything, they may be swapping bikes out there.
True. You could swap bikes.
The time check, they're 27 or so kilometers. So I don't know. And then what do you know about this place called Paris?
Oh, nothing. Just nothing. My cup, which has the metro of Paris. There we go.
Wait, I
spent a lot of time in Paris. Yeah.
Go back to show it again on a little bit closer. There you go.
So,
okay.
So there's Madeleine, Concorde. In fact, if I go this way, it should get to the Champs-Élysées somewhere. Well, I can't figure it out, but anyway, that's why I'm having my coffee this afternoon.
I see your Mercantone Uno bottle in the background there, and a KOM hat.
Cool. Yeah, so this is actually one of the hats. If any of your viewers have been to the tour, there's a huge carnival that goes ahead of the tour. It's a parade of just basically sponsors throwing out free stuff, and that's one of the hats from a grocery store called Carrefour.
Yeah, you see them all over the place advertising. Do you think the caravans are going to be a part of the tour this year?
I've heard that they are. But not nearly to the same level because they don't want as many fans. But this is interesting. How do you stop people from just going to the side of the road? I don't know how you did it. I mean, I can see how you won't have the big crowds at the finish. You can monitor that. But out on the countryside, I don't see how you stop people from doing it. And my guess is they won't. They'll just have smaller numbers at the finishing stage.
This goes all the way back to our original part of conversation of security and the terrorist stuff. We had talked about this before about what do you do? It's open. It's open to the public. It's also the problem with the economics of cycling and not being able to charge admission tickets, blah, blah, blah. But if you watch the Dauphiné or any of these other previous races, people are spread out a little bit more on the climbs. I think they're concerned about the riders. And, the problem you're going to see is if it's this 2-strike thing with riders, it goes back to Greg LeMond, Bernard Hinault in the 86 Tour. Greg's been told, watch your food, watch your bike, tax in the road for the Giro. I think it happened. I mean, there's, stuff. I think that was, had tax thrown or maybe Eddie Merckx too. Eddie Merckx got punched in the kidney. I think it was a 74 Tour.
Really?
Had to drop out. He was in the yellow jersey. This stuff happened. So
yeah, we'll see. Yeah, there's no problem with fans out. I mean, I've been able to go to a stage both at a finish and a start and out in the middle of the country. Not in the middle of the country, you can literally be there with just your family and there's nobody else around. So
but you throw a little COVID at these people. It might take them out.
Or cough.
Right. So tell us about, they're going to have to transport up to the start. It's probably not as far this time from where they're at because they're a little closer to Paris than maybe sometimes.
My guess is I don't know if they're going to do train. I mean, again, this gets into security. Is the tour providing trains and planes that are, I noticed that the transfer after the Pyrenees, it shows a plane.
Right.
And normally when it doesn't show anything, that's typically a train. So I don't know if they've, rented out.
Well, they've done high speed trains before getting to Paris. I don't know the plane. It looks like a plane there. This actually doesn't show the plane on the top transport. Good call.
That typically
maybe
means,
is there a high speed train available there?
Oh, tons. Yeah, from there it's easy, absolutely easy. Okay. It's 2 hours.
Okay,
2 hours.
So in that case, so what do you know about the start town? Anything?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing about the start town.
Perfect.
Mantes-la-Jolie, but obviously the cobblestones of the Champs-Élysées are really, really interesting. So the one thing for people who are maybe watching for the first time or really taking interest, be aware that on the Champs-Élysées, one direction is very clearly slightly downhill and one direction is very clearly slightly uphill. And that makes a huge difference. You'll notice that most of the attacks come when you're going toward the arch, if that makes sense. Because that's where you're
do
going.
a turn, a 180 usually at the top. Is that
they
correct?
do a 180 at the arch and then go down and go around the Place de Concorde under a tunnel. But going up towards that arch, it's ever so slightly uphill. And, the cobbles, this isn't, Paris-Roubaix cobbles. But, I mean, just watch, especially those slow motions. It's taxing. I think a lot of times I think that the Champs-Élysées stage is slightly, it's even underrated, how hard it is to sort of attack, how hard it is to catch somebody because it's brutal on your body. The only part that's not really hard or brutal in terms of the cobbles is right where the start finish is and around the Place de la Concorde, where you come around you come around the circle and then you go right to the finish. But all the rest of it, it's tough.
Do you enjoy that last stage at all?
So you mean watching it?
I mean,
okay.
How else would you have you ridden it?
No,
have you ridden that last stage?
Yes.
No, I mean in the tour. How do you?
So
for
what
instance, I did is I don't enjoy watching it that much because it's so annoying. And so I actually enjoyed. Some of the other tours have done this too, where it's a time trial the last day. Obviously, 89 Tour has done this, but the Vuelta and the Giro, making it exciting on the last day. And this one, it always bores me when it finishes like this.
So I saw it once live, and it's a lot of cycling is just it goes and that's over. At least you get several times, but it's 25 minutes between or more. But like I always say, anytime you can experience something before watching it or whatever, you're going to have a slightly different perspective. So one of the years we were there, they had this opportunity in the morning for cyclists to go just do one lap of the Champs-Élysées. And there were, and I'm not kidding, there were 10,000 cyclists.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Okay. And we all got a yellow shirt. And that's, that's when you realize, okay, that's really uphill a little bit.
Yeah.
So seeing that, it makes me like it even more, and having spent time there. But I'm like you, it's not my favorite stage to watch.
I only say that until they enter, Paris. And then of course
absolutely. And even the first few laps though, sometimes I'm like, do something else and I'll come back for the last couple of laps. But it's so iconic, with all the people that pack in there. And the one time I was able to, so I was literally in Paris for Lance's 5th. Okay. So that whatever year that was. And of course, by then Lance was, it was 10 deep. 10 deep along the entire, I mean, I've never seen so many people. And so obviously it's not going to be that way this time, but you know, it's still a spectacular event. So
did you have any suspicion that he was cheating at that time?
Oh yeah. I knew from the start, Tyler. Didn't you know?
It's always great. It's just like everything else, you know, in life and everything, where it's so easy to judge. You know, we're just having a totally sidebar, but you know, you mentioned history and stuff. You know, like World War II is always so easy because it's the definitive bad guy against the definitive good guy. But you know, being in it at the time is always much different. So yes, I mean, I was pulling for Lance. You don't know. I mean,
the answer is obviously the exact opposite of what I said. Okay, I was an American. So this is before I moved to France. Okay, we were there for a couple weeks. I was thrilled. I was wearing everything that had an American flag on. I wanted everybody to know that Lance. And I'd run into cafes and bars looking for the updates, and I'd be cheering. I mean, yeah, of course. We all were sucked in. I mean, I was thrilled beyond belief when he won.
Any before we go here, any news from France? You just were back over there. You've moved back. Are you closed down for good now, except for being a visitor?
So I've just moved back. I'm now back in the Washington, D.C. area. So I left in January before all this happened. My wife and kids stayed. They came back when COVID came just because we weren't sure what's going to happen. And then we needed to go back to sort of finish up packing. We would not have been able to do that if we didn't have a long-term work permit, because Americans have been banned. So my twins, who are adult age, they weren't able to come with us. I will say that France is, when we were there, you know, people wearing masks in stores, it's mandated, but I think it's much more back to business there. But of course, things are starting to tick up now. I mean, we're starting to see maybe a second wave in Europe. It's funny because most of what I think about when I think about France now is I'm thinking about things like the Tour.
Right.
It looks like it's going to go, because there was a concern, I would say, about a month ago, where there was a real tick in Spain and France, and I think it's come down. So, you know, I'm hoping everything's fine, but you know, as with everything, we're not sure really what's going on half the time.
Right. Any news over there about their concern with this? I mean, are you following along with locally still? And the Dauphiné went off, and it looked like, you know, we're doing okay as far as it appears that, you know, the protocols in place that are working. So,
no, I think from people who I've so let me just say one thing about how the French responded. So my wife was there. So, you know, we all had shutdowns. The French shutdown, though, was, I mean, it's a shutdown. So for about a 6-week period in France, if you were out of your house, you had to have a piece of paper saying where you were going and why. And if you couldn't produce it, and I have friends who had this happen, you were given a ticket. Okay. The first ticket is 135 euros. Okay. The second is 1,000. Okay. So it was like shut down. And we all know what happened in Italy with the horror. And it was the same sort of thing. Once they came out of that, there was a sort of sense of relief, but I don't know if there's this sense like, okay, we can't do that again. I don't want that to happen again. So I think there's this carefulness there that has helped maintain the levels. Obviously, it's easier to have a national policy in France than in the United States. France is a lot smaller. I totally get that. And so that's one of the huge advantages these European countries have. Their problem is making sure all the countries are doing the same thing. But, you know, for now, I think there's a healthy optimism. As far as I know, schools are going back in session. The school where I used to teach starts on Monday, on the 31st, whenever you're listening to this. And as of now, they're going back. So should be okay for the Tour. Hope so.
Okay, good. Any predictions that you would have? And you say, maybe I don't have any. What do you want to see happen? And then what do you think is going to happen for any of this? And have you been paying attention to bike racing?
So that's an excellent question. As we said, as we were talking before, I haven't been following as much as I normally would, because obviously there hasn't been anything going on. I haven't been as up to date with the new, you know, the things that have been happening over the last couple of weeks. So I've had for a long time, as someone who's lived in France, I have this love-hate relationship with the French. I love them, and then sometimes I hate them. So personally, I would love to see a French winner. Now, it would depend on which French winner.
Which one, right?
Yeah, and there are some that I like more than others. There are some who have reputations that are sort of different. There's a lot of the sort of Dutch riders I like too, but I would love to see a French winner at some point, just because, as you said, the Open, it's been since, I mean, it's incredible, actually, if you think about it. And by the way, I think it's not just, I believe it's since, they've had a Grand Tour winner. Am I right on that, or am I wrong?
No, I think
it's not
who
just
who else would it be? Yeah.
I think it is any Grand Tour since 1985 or 6, whatever it was. And that's
85. Yeah.
85. And that's stunning.
It is. Fignon might have won the Giro between then. I'm pretty sure he did, right. Actually.
Okay, yeah. So, but still, one. And there's been a lot of riders that have been coming up over the last years. A lot of them have sort of not quite reached that level that maybe they were hoping. And we'll see if this is it. I thought the Alaphilippe thing I was surprised by that. And I know a lot of, were you as well? I mean, I was surprised.
Not in one sense. I was just telling you before we started recording this, I'm going to do a rider preview show with Mike Sayers, who former pro, DS for BMC and works for USA Cycling. And he told me beforehand, he's like, no. Alaphilippe has the ability to be this kind of person long term. And then this happens and you're like, and then, he ended up, now he's gone in on record forcefully saying, I'm not at all trying to do that this year. So,
I was surprised.
I still kind of was somewhat surprised. You're right.
Yeah, I was too. Someone like Thibaut, obviously, there's guys who I've sort of been pulling for in the past. Not guys I thought could win, but I used to love, like, Warren Barguil had this great couple of years, and he has this interesting personality for the French people, and they like him. But so I'd love to see someone from France win, but I'm not sure who. I like, there's 3 guys I do like, Thibaut Pinot, Romain Bardet, and Guillaume Martin. I'd like all 3 of those. They seem to ride well. I don't really get the bitchiness that you kind of, from an American perspective, of some of those. And I think Alaphilippe is like that too. He rides for Duquesne Quick Step. I can't like that. Well, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so if you're gonna pick someone, you want to just throw it out a name, and we'll see if it works in for you.
Romain Bardet.
Okay. Romain Bardet.
I'm gonna it's just a slight curve there. I'm not going to take the favorite.
Okay. No, I think Romain Bardet, look last few years, without the time trials, he probably has a great chance. So then you have it this time without the time trials. I'm going to reserve and make my picks when we do the other. Actually, I'm going for Roglic. I mean, I just think he's going to win. So it's going to be between him and Egan Bernal. But as far as top French rider, I think Pinot has it. I don't think mentally he has it. And I think that's why they put it. You saw at the Dauphiné where he got put in, he's in first place going into the last day because Roglic pulls out, and mentally he can't handle it. He doesn't have the team to handle it. And you almost have to wait till the very last day of the tour to throw him out there in a time trial where he doesn't have to rely on anything else but just this little climb that's in his hometown. And maybe that's where he's going to do.
So at some point, not for now, but maybe with your rider profile. I mean, there is the issue of the French teams that needs to be discussed, I think, not just the French riders. I mean, sometimes the teams, to me, just fail at the most critical moments.
Well, there's a lot of infighting too. So sometimes they're chasing each other down.
Exactly.
And you, Martin, as an example, he rides for Cofidis. Well, they haven't done Jack in the last, 20 years or so. No. So nothing there. Okay. Any last closing remarks about the route? Any thing that you want to say before we head out? I don't
know. I nothing really to say except what I always say, and the French do a great job with this, whether it's and through their television partners. Enjoy the visuals. I mean, it's one of my favorite things about the Tour de France. I often say that there may be countries that are as pretty as France, but I can't imagine one that is prettier than France. It's absolutely stunning, and they do a terrific job of showing off. The French, they're good at that.
No,
and so my favorite thing, and I guess personally, as someone who has been to a lot of the areas just for this particular tour, I'm just so looking forward to seeing the places where I've driven in a car, and I kind of have a feel for what it's like. I can't wait.
Right. Well, hang on. I'm going to close this out.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you, everyone joining in. I hope you enjoyed the route preview. Jonathan, especially you. Thanks for being a part of this. I'm messing up everything here today. I'm preparing for a trial tomorrow, and
you told me that. That's more important.
I gotta get back to work. Between Two Wheels Podcast. Check us out everywhere podcasts are shown. This is episode 189. Jonathan Scriven. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, everybody.
Bye-bye.